This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. On our website, you can search for individual treasure stories by region, or buy our original magazines themselves. To pay us a visit, please click on the link in the description. Enjoy. Soldier, sailor, saint, and sinner, the famous and the forgotten British Columbia's pioneer, Victoria knew them all. Among the colorful characters who played their parts on this provincial stage, one remains unmatched. He was a monstrous figure in human guise, who left a trail of murder and violence, including the ultimate atrocity of cannibalism, stretching from Missouri through California, Oregon, British Columbia, and back to Montana, where his life ended at the end of a vigilante's rope. This notorious character was Boone Helm. As if to ensure he would never be forgotten, Boone Helm left behind another legacy, a tantalizing story of lost treasure. Hidden in the Caribous, at the foot of an ancient cedar, lies $32,000 in raw gold, the fruit of a triple murder. When Helm swaggered up Victoria's busy Wharf Street on a Sunday afternoon in 1862 to elevate his criminal career to an international level, his evil reputation had already preceded him. With admirable restraint, the Victoria Daily Colonist described him as a dangerous and bad character. A glance at his record reveals just how dangerous and bad he truly was. Born in Kentucky around 1828, Helm came from an ill-fated family, with all 5 of his brothers meeting violent ends. If they were anything like Boone, their deaths were well-deserved and long overdue. Tall and powerful, skilled with gun, knife, and horse, Boone Helm's criminal activities began in Monroe County, Missouri. Prone to uncontrollable rages hinting at deep emotional problems, young Boone initially made a stab at respectability by marrying a girl of good repute. The shaky union produced a daughter, but Mrs. Helm soon realized her colossal mistake and secured a divorce shortly after the child's birth. Footloose and fancy-free again, Boone sought greener pastures. He asked his friend Littlebury Shute to join him in moving to Texas. Shute, however, preferred California. When Littlebury resisted Boone's plans for Texas, an enraged Helm ended their partnership with a Bowie knife. Since Littlebury Shute was his one and only friend, this act illustrates Helm's treatment of strangers. Convicted of the cold-blooded murder, Helm was sentenced to an asylum. The court ruled that his manner was not only unbecoming, but unbalanced. In the asylum, Helm exercised complete self-control for the first time in his life, becoming the prize patient. He was allowed freedom of the grounds under supervision. Eventually, the vigilance of his guard relaxed, and Boone slipped away. Next, we hear of Boone in California, but wild as the goldfields were in 1858, they were not wild enough to tolerate Boone Helm for long. After several shootings, Boone Helm was on the run again, this time heading to Oregon. There, he learned that California regretted losing such a notorious citizen so much that they were preparing extradition papers for him. Realizing it was time to go underground, Boone did so almost permanently. While at the Dalles, he joined a party heading to Camp Floyd, Utah, 60 miles southwest of Salt Lake City. After a failed attempt to steal 2,000 horses from the Walla Walla tribe, the disappointed group proceeded to Raft River. There, they were attacked by Digger Indians. The brief skirmish ended without casualties, but at Bannock River, the warriors raided the camp under cover of darkness, killing the sentry. The 5 survivors made it to the Wasatch Mountain Range, where they faced a more lethal foe winter. Blizzards and sub-zero temperatures soon forced them to take refuge in an abandoned cabin. They survived by killing their exhausted horses one by one, smoking the meat. When the weather cleared, they resumed their journey on snowshoes made of horsehide. Another blizzard caught them, leaving them exhausted and nearly frozen. 3 of the group decided to make shelter and wait out the storm, while Boone Helm and Elijah Burton elected to proceed. The 3 who remained behind were never seen again. Weeks later, a gaunt Helm, dressed in buckskin and accompanied by an Indian, appeared at the camp of fur buyer John W. Powell. The blood-chilling tale Helm told his shocked host has cemented his infamy in American history. Helm claimed the 2 men struggled on until they were exhausted. Facing starvation, Burton supposedly shot himself, although historians believe Helm likely pulled the trigger. Without hesitation, Helm told Powell he dressed his partner like a butchered steer and consumed him over the following days. When partially recovered, he wrapped the remainder of his grub steak, a leg, in a blanket and headed for Camp Floyd. He chanced upon an Indian camp and was guided to Powell's fire and rescue. After accompanying Powell to Salt Lake City, Helm took up horse stealing. According to records, he also rented his gun to the Danite Band, an alleged secret association of Mormons associated with numerous crimes and atrocities. After 2 known murders, he drifted through California and back to Oregon, committing several more killings along the way. Helm then went to Idaho, operating out of Florence until he gunned down an unarmed gambler named Dutch Fred. Once again, he was on the run, with word of his latest atrocity sweeping across the Northwest. This, then, is the infamous character who sauntered off a small steamer onto Enterprise Wharf in Victoria on October 12, 1862. Having exhausted his luck in every Western American state and territory, Boone Helm decided to try his fortune in British Columbia. Hours later, he found himself grimly surveying a tiny cell in Bastion Square's police barracks. When the bartender of the Adelphi Saloon asked for payment for Helm's drinks, the surly outlaw declared that a man of his reputation never paid for refreshments. He repeated this assertion to Sergeant Blake of the city police, who promptly hustled him off to jail. 3 days later, the colonist reported, "Boone Helm, this man, who it is alleged bears a horrible reputation in California and other localities on the Pacific coast, was brought before the police magistrate yesterday, on a remand from Monday last. The prisoner, who is not a bad-looking man, was defended by Mr. Bishop, who argued that a prejudice had been created against him in the minds of residents, and that a subscription had been taken up to defray the costs of the prosecution. The police officers present denied any such arrangement, and the chief of police swore that Helm was known as a bad character." Magistrate Augustus Pemberton was unsympathetic. He ordered Helm to find security to be of good behavior for the term of 6 months, himself in £50 and 2 securities in £20 each. In default, to suffer 1 month's imprisonment. The real reason for this hefty sentence was to keep the penniless outlaw detained until word was sent to the sheriff in Florence, Idaho. Unfortunately, the sheriff must have been busy by the time extradition papers arrived. Helm's month had expired. Outraged by Victoria's inhospitable treatment, he caught the first mainland steamer, heading for the boomtown of Fort Yale. The Caribou was no kinder to the destitute newcomer, especially when he tried to improve his financial situation. This is where our story of lost treasure begins. When 3 miners, carrying $32,000 in coarse gold, were murdered on the trail between Quesnel Forks and Antler Creek, rumors swept the gold camps that Boone Helm was responsible, as he was known to have been on the trail. Since the only constable was drunk, and would have been useless even if sober, enraged miners called a mass meeting. According to pioneer A. Browning, the hastily elected magistrate, pursuit down the trail was determined on, and $700 raised to pay the cost of pursuers. Boone, I imagine, got wind of all this and escaped across the line. However, Helm had not fled the country, as W.T. Collinson ruefully testified. He and Irish Tommy Harvey had traveled with the murdered trio, a miner named Sokolsky, and 2 unnamed Frenchmen from Antler Creek to Keithley Creek, where the ill-fated trio paused for dinner. Collinson and Harvey continued on, reaching Quesnel Forks that evening. The next afternoon, they saw their 3 late companions carried into town on stretchers. They made a brave fight, Collinson recounted. Every man's pistol, good 6-shooters, was empty, and each man had a bullet through his head. Boone Helm and his chum killed these 3 men, took and hid the dust, and if no stranger has found it, it is there yet, for Boone left the country. As proof of that, Collinson recalled his own encounter with the Kentucky killer a few days later. "I met Boone Helm and his chum at Little Bloody Run, just below Cap Venables, a few miles above Cook and Kimball's Ferry, now Spence's Bridge. The first thing I heard was, 'Throw up your hands,' and looking up I saw the muzzle of a double-barrel shotgun about 4 feet from my head. At the other end of the gun was Helm, who glowered menacingly at Collinson during the 5 minutes it took his partner to slash open the traveler's saddlebags and search his pockets. For their trouble, they received $3 Mexican and 3 British shillings, overlooking a pouch of dust rolled up in an old shirt. Returning the emptied revolver, they told me to get and not look back. As my road was downhill, I lost no time." The next time Collinson saw the outlaw was at Sumas in the spring of 1861. Helm was with a pack train on his way to retrieve the dust hidden at Quesnel. The next day I set out to intercept Helm at Yale, but the marshal from Port Townsend was there and took him on a charge of murder. Once again, Helm found himself in a Victoria cell, until he was hustled over the line in irons to make his inglorious exit from the British Columbia stage. Returned to Idaho, he was soon at liberty. Older brother Tex, it seems, was a man of influence, not to mention money. At the brief trial, once voluble witnesses were amazingly mute. Boone Helm was a free man, but finally the end of his bloody trail was near. On a warm January day in 1864, some 6,000 persons in Virginia City, Montana, watched with grim satisfaction as 5 members of the notorious Henry Plummer gang plunged to eternity from as many packing crates. Overhead, the roof beam of an unfinished cabin jerked spasmodically at the sudden weight, then was still. Among the vigilantes' victims was that savage, reckless, defiant marauder of the gold rush days at Caribou, assassin, and reputed cannibal, in short, Boone Helm. Today, beside a lonely, partially overgrown trail heading out from the Caribou ghost town of Quesnel Forks to the scant remains of another town of the past, Antler Creek, there stands a particular cedar tree. And here in the forest monarch's trailing roots, according to popular legend, are the rotted saddlebags of poor Sokolsky and the 2 Frenchmen containing $32,000 in gold. Unfortunately for treasure hunters, Murderer's Gulch contains a great many cedar trees. Pioneers were convinced that Helm disposed of his partner, then hid the gold in case he was arrested. They were sure of this because, as Collinson pointed out, he had dared return to the area less than a year later, knowing he was wanted for the murders, only to be arrested and extradited to Idaho. The fortune must be there today in lonely Murderer's Gulch, 30 miles south of Barkerville, waiting to be found, the treasure of Boone Helm, cannibal murderer of Caribou. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.